We're still 6 days away from the trade deadline, but for the Orioles, the deals have begun. Gregory Soto has been sent to the Mets for two pitching prospects. I'll break down this trade from every angle coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, July 25th, 2025, and welcome back into a special late-night edition of the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to jump into the Orioles, really not their first trade of the year, but their first trade of deadline season. Gregory Soto being dealt to the New York Mets for two pitching prospects. I'll talk about why the Orioles would trade Soto, why the Mets would want him, and then we'll break down the two guys that the Orioles are adding to their system. Now, if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You may notice the background is not the same. If you listened to Friday's episode, which if you haven't, go back and check that out. We talked about the Orioles win in Cleveland on Thursday. We talked about Felix Bautista being added to the injured list, the Orioles getting some more draft pick signings done. And I talked about how I was going on vacation for a couple of days and it was close to the deadline. And I said, I pretty much guarantee the Orioles are going to make a trade while I'm gone because it happened last year with the Eflin and the Dominguez deals. And well, it happened again. Well, luckily, brought the laptop and brought the microphone. So not the exact same setup as you're used to seeing, but shout out to this New Jersey hotel. We are going to make it work. So Gregory Soto is no longer a Baltimore Oriole. The full trade was Soto sent to the Mets for two right-handed pitching prospects. One is Wellington Aracena, and one is Cameron Foster. And we will talk about the two of them later in the show. But let's start with the Gregory Soto side of this deal. Why did the O's deal him, and why did the Mets want him? Well, first of all, he's someone who I had put on the list along with Aracena Dominguez and Charlie Morton as kind of the top tier of most likely Orioles to be traded at the deadline. I put them in the tier of you just take the best offer. You're going to deal them, you pit teams against each other, and you take the best return that you can get, and that seems like what the Orioles did here with Soto. He's a rental reliever, meaning he's hitting free agency after this year. The Orioles clearly are not going anywhere. I just watched them lose at home to the Colorado Rockies on Friday night. These are the easiest players to deal at the deadline. Rental relievers who are having a good season, have a track record of success. Those are the guys you want to deal first, and that is exactly what the Orioles did. And the other side of it is everybody needs relievers at the deadline, so there's always going to be someone to take him. Now, in terms of Soto's time with the Orioles, it was just shy of 1 calendar year. The Orioles acquired him in a trade at last year's deadline, actually right before the deadline passed on July 30th of 2024. They got Soto from the Phillies for two right-handed pitching prospects in Moises Chase and Seth Johnson. Chase was definitely an ascending pitching prospect at the time. He was making his way to Double-A. He then had some injury issues this year in Philly, even though he was ranked as a top 5 guy in their system, and he ended up getting Tommy John surgery in May. On the Seth Johnson side, he was a guy who the Orioles had brought in a deal a couple of years ago. Maybe a starter, maybe a reliever, had some injury issues in his career. Unfortunately for Johnson, he's gotten a chance in the big leagues in the bullpen this year for the Phillies. Hasn't been great so far. He's kind of currently in their pen, so we will see how that works out for him. He's pitched 8 innings for the Phillies so far this year. But the O's got Soto. He came in to kind of reinforce a bullpen, which was without Felix Bautista last year. They didn't have him for the entire year. And it had gotten to the point at the trade deadline where it was pretty clear Craig Kimbrell is not the closer for this team. He was still on the team and was still trying to get some outs, but the O's needed some bullpen help. They had already gotten Aracena Dominguez earlier. They went and got Soto because they wanted a good lefty. Casino Perez, he was fading a little bit. Keegan Aiken had been good, but they wanted that high stuff lefty that Perez was just not giving them anymore. And they went and got Soto. And a lot of people jumped off the Soto train pretty immediately because he was not good. Those first 3 outings that he pitched for the Orioles after the trade, he was horrendous. He allowed 8 runs on 7 hits in just an inning and a third with a strikeout, 3 walks, and a home run allowed. And a lot of people allowed that to just kind of shape their entire perception, of Gregory Soto, and they looked at his end-of-season stats with the Orioles, and they said, yeah, sure, he got better, but he still finished with a 5.09 ERA as an Oriole. The thing is, all you got to do is look past those 3 outings, because after that, Soto was, I don't think it was a debate. Gregory Soto was the best reliever in the Orioles bullpen after those 3 terrible outings. In his final 20 appearances out of the pen with the Orioles, 16 1/3 innings, 11 hits, just 2 earned runs, 20 strikeouts to 4 walks, and only 1 home run allowed. He, by Fangraph's leverage index, was coming in the highest leverage spots out of any Oriole reliever in the final few weeks of September. That's how much Brandon Hyde trusted him in that bullpen at the end. And obviously, the Orioles brought him back for 2025 because when they made the trade, he had a year and a half of team control, just like Dominguez did. That was another reason why they made the deal. He wasn't just a rental reliever, and they're only paying him about $5.4 million this year. And it has been an up and down season at times. His stats with the Orioles this season: 36 1/3 innings, a 3.96 ERA, a 3.26 FIP on the year. Pretty good strikeout to walk numbers, 28% strikeout rate, and an 11% walk rate to go with it. And, his ground ball rate is down this year, down to 45%, which is his lowest of his career, which is some of the struggles that he's had, but it's still big time stuff that he has. Strikeout rate's up a little from last year. Walk rate's basically the same. It's also his lowest ERA since 2022 and his lowest FIP of his career. So the underlying data tells you Soto might be having the best season of his major league career. Lefties are hitting just 138 against him this year. He's put up a 0 in 7 of his final 8 outings as an Oriole, including his final one on Thursday. With Felix Bautista being added to the injured list, Soto gets the 9th inning in a 1-run game, and he goes 1-2-3 with 2 strikeouts to get his first, and ended up being only save as an Oriole. Probably bumped his value up a little bit as well. I mean, he's got the 2 different fastball that sit at 97. He's got a wipeout slider with huge swing and miss rates. This is a lefty that teams want, and I talked about this earlier this week, kind of comparing the players the Orioles have to deal versus the other guys who are available in the big leagues this year at the deadline. And I said, Soto might be the best lefty reliever who's available. You could argue Danny Coulombe, but in terms of stuff, Soto's just a different animal than Coulombe is. Coulombe's had better results, obviously, but he also has more injury history the past couple of years. You can make a strong argument that Soto is the best lefty reliever out there. And any team would want him, but especially the Mets. Because the Mets' 2 top left-handed pitchers at the beginning of the season, A.J. Minter and Danny Young, they are both out for the year with arm surgeries. They've been rotating Orioles legend Brandon Waddell and Richard Lovelady in and out of that bullpen. Lovelady was just DFA'd. Waddell is now on the injured list. 37-year-old Brooks Raley, at the time of the trade, was their only left-hander in the bullpen. They have another rookie who they just called up on Friday who's kind of been up and down. Brooks Raley, who had Tommy John surgery, was activated off the injured list from Tommy John last Friday, has thrown just 3 innings in a Mets uniform, and is 37, was the only lefty that a playoff team had in their bullpen. They desperately needed a high-leverage lefty, and that is why they went and got Gregory Soto. Now, in terms of the changes in the Orioles bullpen, Grant Wolfram for the time becomes the only left-handed pitcher. He did throw a scoreless inning out of the bullpen on Friday night, and he'll get some bigger chances against lefties. Now, Keegan Aiken, he did throw a rehab outing in AAA on Wednesday. That was his first rehab appearance, at least in the AAA level. He threw a game in the FCL and then went to AAA, but that was the first one since he went on the IL with that shoulder injury. So seemingly Keegan Aiken will probably be back at some point next week, I would have to think. And so when you get Aiken back, he kind of becomes the guy who replaces Soto, quote unquote, in the bullpen. There'll be other moves that are made in the meantime, but Aiken will come back and you'll go back to the 2 lefties that you would certainly want to have in your bullpen at any given time. Maybe another chance for Cionel Perez at some point, although he's been just as bad in AAA as he was in the big leagues. He's got a 6+ ERA and an equal amount of walks and strikeouts, but it'll be more big-time chances for Aiken and then more chances for Grant Wolfram as they kind of evaluate both of those guys. Will they be relievers for this team on the big league roster in 2026? But that's what the Orioles did, giving up Gregory Soto. Let's talk about really the more important part now for the Orioles. Soto had some great moments with the O's. He's now a New York Met. We now turn our attention to who the Orioles got back. We will break down the 2 pitching prospects that they received in return. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. And Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, they actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming Orioles game. Even though they're playing the Rockies and even though they lost Friday, got some games coming up this weekend, you can get tickets on Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the Orioles sent Gregory Soto to the Mets for two pitching prospects in really their first kind of deadline deal. Obviously, they made the Brian Baker trade a couple of weeks ago, but this less than a week away from the deadline is really when selling season begins for the Orioles. They got two pitchers back. And let's start with kind of the higher upside play that they got in this trade, and that is Wellington Aracena. I'm going to do a quality control check to make sure I am pronouncing that name correctly, but for now we're going with Wellington Aracena. He is a 20-year-old, 6'3" right-handed pitcher who the Mets signed as part of their international signing class out of the Dominican Republic back in 2022. Eric Longenhagen over at Fangraphs has Aracena ranked as his 14th best prospect in the Mets system and has him as a 45 future value player. Now, 2025 Aracena is his first full stateside season. He spent the year in low A, and he has dominated low A. 64 and a third innings, 2.38 ERA at the low A level, 32% strikeout rate, and a 13% walk rate. This is big-time strikeout stuff for a 20-year-old right-hander with a FIP to go with it. He is yet to allow a home run this season, which is kind of wild. He's got a pretty good ground ball rate at 49%. He is putting up some good stats. And when you go through Eric Longenhagen's write-up over at Fangraphs, he talks about that Aracena had a huge velocity boost back in 2024. He now sits 96 to 99 and has been regularly up to 101 miles an hour with his fastball this season. His fastball kind of has some natural cut. Kind of think Kyle Bradish's fastball. That's what it looks like, just with more velocity. He's got a slider in the upper 80s that Eric writes about has some good vertical movement, and then a cutter in the low 90s that he throws as well. Now, Longenhagen sees him maybe as a reliever long term, but he's still a 20-year-old in low A, and he's being worked as a starter right now for the Mets. He's pitched anywhere from like 4 to 5 2/3 innings in most of his outings in low A this season. Even if he's been coming out of the bullpen, he's been like a piggyback long relief type guy, not really working as a one-inning reliever. He's been working as a starter, and in his last 7 outings, he's been incredible. 31 2/3 innings, 12 hits, 3 earned runs, 39 strikeouts to 14 walks. That is a 0.85 ERA in his last 7 outings. You have to think that he was very close to getting promoted to High A Brooklyn for the Mets, and I would not be shocked at all if the Orioles get him in and just send him right to High A Aberdeen, right? They don't even say, hey, you were in low A, so let's send you to Delmarva to where you were. Like, I'm looking now to see if they have assigned him already, but yeah, so they have assigned him to Delmarva officially at the moment, but do not be surprised if fairly quickly he ends up going to make himself to High A and potentially beyond if he pitches well at that level. The write-up from Eric Longenhagen, the biggest quote is, quote, everything he throws is hard and requires a ton of effort, making him a cleaner fit in the bullpen. There, Aracena has a chance to be a special weapon. There aren't really many other big league pitchers whose stuff bears a resemblance to Aracena's cutter-heavy mix. That is interesting to say that he's kind of a one-of-a-kind pitcher. That's something the Orioles are going to like. Now, the ETA at Fangraphs is 2028. If he becomes a reliever, that could be sped up and be more like 2027. But the O's are going to keep him working as a starting pitcher for as long as possible. I did think the Orioles, as I've talked about, would push more to get guys who are closer to the big leagues, right? Not 20-year-olds who are in low A. But I also mentioned earlier this week that there were potential situations where the Orioles would have to choose between, hey, would you like, these two pitchers who are closer to the big leagues, but maybe their upside is not as high? Or would you like this one pitcher who's much younger, but has a much higher upside? That is kind of what the Orioles chose here with Aracena. He is the better of the two prospects who they got, and he has a chance to be a really good arm in the big leagues. He's just still a few years away. But luckily, the O's did get another arm in this deal, and he is much, much closer to the bigs and could easily be helping the Orioles out of the bullpen in 2026 when they try to be contenders again. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Cameron Foster, the other piece of this deal, coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Day Hue. For Orioles fans like me, this one just really hits the mark. Game Day Hue makes clean, no-logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. I love rocking the hat that I got from Game Day Hue. It's just white and orange, right? It pairs with my usual gear. Doesn't replace the team logo stuff. It just adds to the lineup. I can wear it to the ballpark, but I can wear it out and about. And it kind of matches with everything as well, which is nice. And it's not just hats. Check out their split shade gloves made for the golf course with a perfect gift for the fan who has everything. And right now you can get 15% off with code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDay, HUE.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's the time to load up. Let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. So let's chat about briefly the other piece of this deal that the Orioles got back. It was not just the 20-year-old Wellington Aracena. It was also 26-year-old 6'5" right-handed pitcher Cameron Foster, who the O's got back in this deal as well. Foster was a 14th round selection by the Mets back in the 2022 draft out of McNeese State, a right-handed pitcher who signed for just a $40,000 signing bonus, but he has been really good in the Mets system. Went eventually to high A in 2023, made it to double A in 2024, had some good numbers, but he did go back to double A this year. And the reason why is that the Mets officially converted him to a reliever this year. He worked fully as a starter his first minor league season, kind of worked some starting, some relief last year. And the Mets said, this stuff plays better out of the bullpen. You're going to be a full-time reliever and learn how to do it in double A. And he was one of the most unhittable relievers in all of double A baseball this season. 26 2/3 innings for the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. That is the double A affiliate of the Mets. 19 games, 26 2/3 innings, a 1.01 ERA. He has not allowed a home run. He allowed just 17 hits, and it was a 34% strikeout rate to a 5% walk rate. Those are absurd numbers for Cameron Foster. Now, he also had not allowed a run in his final 13 appearances at the double A level with the Mets. Now, he did pitch a tiny bit in triple A this year. Didn't kind of get the call up and stayed there. He's bounced up and down a couple of times, made 2 AAA appearances this year, one in May and one on July 12th, but both times he was sent back down to double A afterwards. The Mets just really needed an arm both times. The first one went well. He pitched 3 strong innings. The last one, he allowed 6 runs in 2/3 of an inning. So kind of a mixed bag, but again, very small sample size in AAA. Now, Eric Longenhagen over at Fangraphs did not rank Cameron Foster. I think you ranked like top 40 Mets prospects this June, and Foster was not in there, but he always does a list below the top 40-ish and kind of, name drops other guys that he's intrigued by and gives a little blurb on them. Foster was in that list, and this is the write-up from Eric Longenhagen at Fangraphs. Quote, Foster is a 26-year-old former 14th round pick out of McNeese who has developed a plus slider and a couple other good breaking balls. He has a middle relief shot, even though he's a much older guy. And he is older, right? He's 26 years old, still pitching mostly in double A. Most 26-year-olds, if they have the talent, are already in the big leagues. But it is good stuff, and he was an older college pitcher, right? When he got drafted in the 14th round, I believe he was a 5-year college pitcher, because when he threw his first minor league game, he was already 23 or 24. Like, he was an older pitcher, which is why in college, which is why he's older now in the minors. But it's a four-seam fastball. It's sitting around 95. It's got 18 inches of induced vertical break, which is pretty good. Also throws a cutter at 88, a curveball at 79, and a slider at 83. And I think he tries a changeup at times is something he's thinking about. If maybe the Orioles convert him back to a starter, he can bring back the changeup. If not, it's probably more of a four-pitch mix. Now, he's one of these guys that has this carrying trait, which makes him stand out. He is almost completely straight over the top when he throws from the right side. A 61-degree arm angle is one of the highest, most over-the-top deliveries it would be in all of Major League Baseball if he were there. Only 3 pitchers in the big leagues this year throw more over the top than Cameron Foster does. It's Chris Flexen of the Cubs, it's Jeremiah Estrada, the lockdown setup man for the Padres, and it's Felix Bautista. Those are the only 3 who throw more over the top with a higher arm angle than Foster. And yes, he is 26. You're like, Connor, is this guy really a prospect? He's 26 in Double-A. You know what? Like, you're not wrong with that, right? That's fairly old to still be in Double-A. Doesn't look like the Orioles have assigned him just yet, but my belief is that he will probably go directly to AAA Norfolk and continue to work out of the bullpen. And I don't know if he'll debut for the Orioles this year, but he is a guy who has a real shot to be in the bullpen next year. And Foster, although he's much less of a prospect than Aracena is, he's a good fit because, again, as I mentioned, the Orioles should be prioritizing pitchers who are going to be ready to help them at the big league level in 2026 when they are ready to compete again. And although Foster doesn't have the highest ceiling, he's a guy who you would think is going to be ready to pitch in the big leagues, if not later this year, then at the least by next year. Who knows if it's going to work out? And he is Rule 5 eligible this offseason, so the Orioles will need to add him to the 40-man roster in December to protect him. So they'll basically have to decide by December whether or not he's worth it. You would think they would because they got him in a trade, but we will see. It'll be interesting to follow him. It's just that interesting trait with the over-the-top, the high IVB fastball. It's not the velocity of Felix Bautista. Well, maybe Bautista's last outing, unfortunately, before the shoulder injury. But it's that kind of fastball and delivery and body type that he has that makes him intriguing and a kind of relief prospect that you are interested to go and get. So that's the trade. Let me know here in the Locked On Orioles YouTube comments what you think of the deal. Too much? Did they steal this trade? Gregory Soto to the Mets. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Again, this is up here late on a Friday night. Wanted to do this for you all, get an episode out with a trade, even though I'm sitting in a hotel in New Jersey. Sorry, it's not the greatest production value that it usually is, but hopefully you got the info that you needed. One other thing to get to for the Orioles is that they did have an open roster spot, obviously, because they had Gregory Soto on the roster. He gets traded. You don't get any big league players back. So they actually, and you would think they would call up a pitcher, but they actually did not. What they did do is call up Jeremiah Jackson, 25-year-old infielder who the Orioles signed to a minor league deal this offseason. He was a second-round pick out of high school by the Angels all the way back in 2018. And I've talked about Jeremiah Jackson once before this year because he has been legitimately one of the best hitters in all of AAA baseball this year. In 162 plate appearances in Norfolk, he's hitting .377 with 11 home runs and a 183 WRC+. He has been absurd at that level. He's got good hard hit rates. He's only 25 years old. He plays multiple positions in the infield, and the Orioles were even playing him in the outfield a little bit. He's an interesting guy who was a minor league signing, but has kind of turned into a prospect at this point. And if you set the minimum at 150 plate appearances in AAA this year, Jeremiah Jackson is the best hitter in AAA baseball with a 183 WRC+. The next best is Nick Solak in Pittsburgh's AAA with a 168. That's how good he has been. I don't know how this roster thing is going to work. They're going to want to get another pitcher up here at some point. So we'll see if they send Jackson back down or if they keep him around. I would not mind at all if they kept Jackson around for a little bit and gave him a shot down the stretch. He has absolutely deserved it, but just kind of an interesting other part of this to watch out for. Other updates, I guess, to get to since we're recording anyway. Adley Rutschman played another rehab game in AAA on Friday night. We thought there was a chance he might get activated to the big leagues on Friday, but he did catch. He went 1 for 5. He caught the whole game on Friday. That is a good sign. So maybe Saturday or maybe Sunday he would be back. And I mean, Alex Jackson just hitting the cover off the ball on Friday. When Adley comes back, I've said it once, I would much rather just DFA Jacob Stallings and keep Alex Jackson around as the backup for the time being. Chadwick Tromp is getting a little closer maybe to coming back. He played in some rehab games in Aberdeen, but the Orioles actually outrighted him off the 40-man roster quietly on Friday, so he's sitting in Norfolk right now, so they might not even go to Tromp initially. I think the O's plan is get Adley here, DFA Stallings, and keep Alex Jackson as the backup basically until Gary Sanchez comes back. And Alex Jackson, former top prospect, he's swinging the bat well, he's solid defensively. Like, give him a shot, See, you never know what could happen. You got a chance to give a lot of guys a shot down the stretch. Alex Jackson, Jeremiah Jackson, going to be the two guys that they give shots to. They've already got Jackson Holiday. They're 2 away from the Jackson 5 here in Baltimore this year. But thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen, watching here on YouTube. I'll still be back on Monday recapping this series between the Orioles and the Rockies. They lost game 1. I mean, they better win these next 2 and get a series win, because if they lose a series at home to the 26-win Colorado Rockies, I don't know what I'm going to be like in that episode on Monday, but there's still going to be one either way. And if there is another trade this weekend, I'll get you another episode like this to break it all down. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.